So, good evening, everybody, and welcome once again to another of our monthly TFA webinars. This evening, we'll be talking about taking forward the recommendations of the ROC Review, very much hot off the press. As you will have seen, many of you, that we've had a government statement today and various other input, of which Baroness Rock has obviously also contributed. So, this is all very current, and it's really a great pleasure that this evening we're able to welcome DEFRA Minister Mark Spencer, who has the responsibility, Minister of State of Food and Farming, and responsibility for the tenanted sector, obviously within that. So welcome, Mark, and thank you very much for attending this evening. I'm sure you've had a particularly busy, well, I was going to say a few days, but I think it's been longer than that. So it's really grateful for you to take the time to come and speak to us this evening. And many of you will know Baroness Kate Rock, whose review this is obviously what we're talking about. As you will know, Baroness Rock has been a big supporter of the tenanted sector throughout her life, I guess, as a tenant farmer herself. But the review is extremely useful at this particular time, because we all know we're working in a whole new environment in lots of ways. So it's going to be really good to hear tonight from both the Minister and Baroness Rock. And we'll also have a short time before we go to Q&A to hear from our Chief Executive, George Dunn, about the TFA's response to the ROC Review and the government's response to it. Just before we start, just a couple of the usual sort of housekeeping stuff. As many of you will know, the webinar has been recorded and can be watched back either on our YouTube channel or via the website after the event. So if you don't catch something this evening, or you know someone that hasn't been able to catch you, who wants to see it, please point them in that direction. And as always, we are particularly grateful to Oxbury Bank for sponsoring these webinars. As many of you who may have attended the last webinar, Oxbury presented very well about their new position. They're very much the new kids on the block in terms of finance within the agricultural industry. And for those of you that didn't see their presentation at the last webinar, it might be worth going back and taking a look, because I think their approach to finance, particularly with relevance to the tenanted sector, is a bit of a breath of fresh air. So really grateful to Oxbury for once again sponsoring the event. We've obviously got a lot to cover tonight. We've got some questions already that we've had sent through, but please, if you have questions during the webinar, please put them in the Q&A box, which is either at the bottom or the top of your screen, hopefully. So please put them in the Q&A, and we'll try and pick up on as many of those as we can. And I'm pleased to say that Minister Spencer and Baroness Rock have agreed to those questions that we aren't able to answer tonight, because I'm sure there will be some. We will get a response to those and be able to put them again on our website. So please use the Q&A box for that. So I think without further ado, we'll crack on, and I'd like to invite Minister Spencer to come online first and just talk us through the government response to the ROC Review. So good evening, Minister, and thank you very much for giving up your time. Much appreciated.
You're very welcome. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted?
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. So, I mean, first of all, Mark, can I say a huge thank you to the TFA, not only for tonight's webinar, but the work that you do in the sector. You know, I know that we don't always agree on everything, but we do. I do view the TFA as a critical friend. And someone who is there, you know, for us to bounce ideas off, to share ideas, and you know, you're certainly a trusted partner in terms of working together and developing policy, not only in the past but also going forward. And I think the second thing I ought to just recognise is the huge amount of work that Kate Rock has put in to preparing her report over months and months of research, of dedication, of tenaciously pursuing government and making sure that we have our ears open to her ideas and recommendations. And I think today is a sort of culmination of all of that work. We've now issued our report, our response to that report. We are, of course, embracing the majority of the recommendations that Kate has put forward. And I think we're also, open-minded to going even further down that road as well, albeit with a sort of a bit more thought and process to make sure that we continue to embrace and support tenants up and down the country, because I recognise the huge contribution that tenant farmers make, not only to keeping us well fed, but also to shaping our landscapes, to improving our environment, to improving our biodiversity. And I want the schemes that we are developing and are pushing to be open to tenant farmers, to be able to embrace, to be there to assist your members in making a profit and to improving the environment and improving our biodiversity. So, I can talk for 50 minutes, but I think it's better if I keep my comments short so that your members and people on the webinar have the opportunity to ask the questions they want to ask, and we can talk about what they want to talk about.
I wonder, Minister, if you could pick up a few of the key points that you feel are critical in this. I'm conscious that we'll have a lot of members on the webinar this evening who maybe haven't had time to fully digest the report, and it would be useful if you could maybe just give us 5 minutes of just some of the key points that you think are really important for us to sort of gather. We clearly can't digest it all in a couple of hours. There's a lot of stuff in there, but it would be useful just to hear, from your perspective, what you think the key things are for us to take home, I guess.
Yeah, so of course, so number one, I think it's worth pointing out there were 70 odd recommendations. We're not just responding to those today. We've actually been listening during the process of developing the ELM scheme. So we've been taking into account recommendations within the RUC review as we've been developing those schemes. We've also been talking to your members on panels to make sure that we are designing in those recommendations as we've created the SFI and developed countryside stewardship. So to make sure that they are eligible to your members to be able to embrace. We've also been, I think this is Kate's biggest success, is that she got the Treasury to listen as well, to make sure that on the tax front, we're not going to be penalised by the tax regime if you embrace environmental schemes in the future, and they're consulting on that. Now, for those of you who have anything to do with politics, you will know getting the Treasury to move on anything is bloody difficult. And I think that is a huge tribute to Kate that she was able to deliver that. And then we're establishing this this Farmers Tenancy Forum, which will be chaired by Julian Sayers, which is going to be different to what was there before in a very important way, in that it's going to have ministerial involvement. It's going to have a senior DEFRA official joint chair it with Julian. We've committed to the farming minister or a minister attending on a quarterly basis. And I think that really does change the dynamic and the impetus behind that group of individuals who will have regular access to high-ranking officials within DEFRA, but also to the minister, to really get under the skin of what's happening in the real world on a regular basis, and what is, vexing your members and challenging them, and what is working for your members and what isn't working. And I think that's a really healthy system of engagement that is nailed on, if you like, for the future. So I think they're the headlines, really. There's loads of other stuff in there that is positive. I think it would be remiss of me to say that we've not gone as far as maybe George would have wanted us to have done in some areas, but again, pushing RICS to a place where they're bringing forward this code of practice. I want to hold the feet to the fire of those land agents who do behave in an inappropriate way, who don't act fairly, and I want to make sure that RICS are going to take action, which is why they've developed this code of practice, which they're going to operate to in the future, getting that in writing and getting it out there so that we can all make sure that they behave in the right way, I think is a big step forward as well.
That's brilliant, Minister. Thank you. And I think you've picked up on those sort of key areas that are really vital to us. And I guess the key to it from where we are, and no doubt George and Kate will give us a bit more on this, but the tenancy forum that you've pulled together really needs to be about implementation and delivery, and hopefully that'll be the starkest difference to Trig that we can hope for. So that's to be welcomed cautiously, as people say, but I think it's definitely to be welcomed. So that's really good news, and we'll pick up on some of the other points in a bit. So thank you very much for that. Baroness Rock, can I ask you just to give us a little bit of a flavour of your reflection on the government's response and the good, the bad and the ugly, maybe, on it?
Mark, thank you. You've stolen my punchline about the tenancy forum, but I just want to echo the Minister's comments about the TFA. I met many of the TFA members over the last year as I was going up and down the country, and your members were enthusiastic about change, transparent, gave lots of ideas to the tenancy working group, and I really valued the conversations that I had with members of the TFA, along with lots of other organisations as well. But it was really helpful for us, and your members will have seen a lot of thought of their thoughts that went into the recommendations. So I really do echo the Minister's comments about the TFA being a critical friend to government, and your voice is extremely powerful and listened to across government. So thank you for that. And as chair, I also want to really pay tribute to the Farming Minister. He was not the Farming Minister when I started this review, and the way the Minister really embraced it halfway through the process was really fantastic for me. He came in, with different secretaries of state. We don't need to go there, but I'm really thankful, Mark. Thank you, because we had some really engaged, fantastic conversations. We didn't necessarily agree on everything, but what we did do was have very respectful and intelligent conversations, and I'm really grateful to you, and I'm also really grateful to your team. So thank you very much indeed. I had the privilege of sitting in the chamber today to hear Mark deliver his ministerial statement, which was a real treat for me, and quite a moment, I think, for all of us tenant farmers. And I think that I would go so far as when Mark talked about when the Minister talked about the Farm Tenancy Forum, he was very clear that it was implementing the recommendations. And if you look at the terms of reference, it is about implementation. So to your point, Mark, absolutely, I have taken the word of DEFRA and the ministerial team that is the key to the forum, and I've therefore really welcomed the forum. I don't think it will be a copycat of Trig. Trig started in 2002. I think everybody in the industry knew what important part it played, but things move on, and we're in a very different time in agriculture now. So I think it will be a step change. And I'm really grateful that that it wasn't a recommendation. Actually, it was an idea from DEFRA and from the Minister himself. So thank you for adding a recommendation, adding something in that wasn't even a recommendation, Minister. So I think taking that group is going to be really important. I'm delighted that Julian Sayers is going to chair it alongside a DEFRA official. I think that's really good news, and I look forward to working with the new forum very closely. So I think I am sort of very supportive of that. Now, obviously, as the Minister alluded to, there were a few things that perhaps me as chair, who obviously as the chair who writes the report wants everything. You're never in politics going to get everything, and I totally recognise that. There are some areas that I was a bit disappointed by. I think that we need to continue to discuss the concerns around new clauses being inserted into FBTs. We have significant evidence of this, not just from the TFA, but from the NFU as well. that, you know, these new clauses reserve the right for only the landlord to enter into the new schemes. I think that the forum need to look at that and look at that very quickly in their first meeting, because it is about delivering, you know, our recommendation on securing tenant access to all of the schemes. I'm really grateful that throughout the process, and as the Minister alluded to, recommendations were taken through, and you can see that with the recommendation that tenant access to the SFI doesn't lead landlord consent. I'd like to see that going forward into CS and landscape recovery. I'm really pleased that landscape recovery has got tenants involved in its first round, and I think we can see more of that to come, but it must be a collaborative approach. I'm sorry that the government sort of avoided the recommendation about having a fair basis on which to engage in diversified activities. The Minister and I visited a farm on Tuesday, which was a fantastic tenant farmer who had a lot of diversified activities, and he was very clear that he wouldn't survive without them. So I'd like to, I think that diversity is a real and present, you know, not being able to diversify, I think is a real and present threat to a tenant's business. And I would really encourage all the TFA members to maybe speak to the Minister about how it's important to diversify in the new age of agriculture. I think that we're still all very worried about land being taken back in hand by landlords for tree planting, as I said, to enter schemes themselves. This was raised by a lot of tenant farmers across the country when I visited them, actually by a lot of landlords as well, and land agents. So again, I'd like to see the forum really look at that. We provided a lot of evidence. I don't think there needs to be much more evidence, but I'd like the forum to really, really focus on how we can stop that. It's government's stated objective not to have land coming out of the tenanted sector. So let's take that stated objective and work towards it. The Minister mentioned the new code of practice. I'm really delighted with this. I think it's a really powerful message to everybody, to tenants, to landlords, to land agents, that we need to work together and we need to be respectful and collaborative in our approach. And I strongly believe that a code of practice is the right way to go. And I'm really grateful for the RICS for leading on this. I know that they've been already making significant progress today in some of the things that they've been talking about. And I'm delighted that I've had texts from land agents saying, we think this is terrific and we're going to sign up to this. And that's from big land agent companies. So I'm really pleased that there's been a proactive approach from the land agents. I think this could be a potential real sea change actually for us. I'm really pleased that we're examining the appointment of a tenant farming commissioner. Slightly disappointed that we didn't get there in one go, but I recognise the challenges of that. But I think that really this call to evidence should be about how we can make a commissioner work, not do we need one. I think we've already evidenced that we do. We've got significant support from landlords, church commissioners, National Trust, from the TFA obviously, and as well from the NFU. So I think there's a real appetite for it. We've just got to take it one step forward. A bit like the Minister, I think I'm going to stop because I've sort of said really what I think. I warmly welcome the government's response today. I'm delighted that we've got a response. Sometimes these things do take a lot longer. And again, I really want to thank the team because I know how hard everybody's worked towards today behind the scenes. So, Mark, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kay. That's really good to hear. And I think what is really encouraging about this is that it appears to me we've got some positives coming out of something, which is so good to see. And I'm going to hand over to George in a minute, who might spoil the party, but I'm hoping not too much. But I think it's really incumbent on us all and to take some positives out and to help with these things moving forward. We can all sit on the sidelines and criticise what everybody's doing. But I think one of the really positive things that's come out of both your report, Kate, and also perhaps the response today is that there is some positive stuff that can be done to engage tenant farmers in moving forward in the new environment, and that in itself must be welcome. So thanks to the Minister for sort of driving that forward, I guess. And we probably went through a period last year of constant change of ministers, and we weren't really quite sure where anything was going to land. But it's good to see that some of this is coming to fruition, and so I think that's to be welcomed. Clearly, it's not perfect, we know that, but it is welcome to hear that tenant farming does play an important part in what governments see as a future of agriculture, because sometimes sitting on our own, muddling away, trying to make ends meet, it can sometimes feel a little bit different. And I know some members will be in that boat. So it's really good to hear some positive stuff. So that's to be welcome. Thank you both. I'm going to just give George a few minutes, if you'd like to come in, George, and just sort of see from our own TFA perspective what our kind of initial thoughts are and responses, and what we would like to see happening going forward. So I don't think George needs any introduction to anybody. So here's our Chief Executive, George Dunn.
Thanks, Mark. I do appreciate your welcome onto tonight's webinar. And I was very privileged to be a member of Kate's review group. I was on the review group in my own capacity, which made my day job a bit difficult from time to time, because I had to respect the confidentiality of the process that we were involved with Kate, and that was something which I had to do. So I was keeping lots of things from my employers as we were talking about stuff. But I think it's been to a good end, and I think Kate took 9 months to write her report. It's taken me 26 years as the Chief Executive of TFA to get to this point. So Kate's obviously been much more efficient at this than I've ever been. So thanks, Kate, so much for your tenacity and for your advocacy for your own report, and for not just getting the report written and leaving it on the shelf and leaving others to pick it up. You've been absolutely first class in making sure that you've held the government's feet to the fire. And to the Minister, calling me a critical friend, I think over the past little while, he's probably found me more critical than a friend, but he certainly was very gracious in me giving him both barrels the other day when we were talking about what the government's response might look like. And it's been good actually over the past 24 hours just to engage with various bits of government to make sure that the key and central plank of this response from the government is making the new Tenant Farming Forum work, and making it work as an effective implementing body, which we've all said. And despite our frustration that all of the 74 recommendations haven't been taken forward immediately, we need to work as constructively as we possibly can with the new forum. It's got to be different to Trig. It's got to be about looking ahead and taking things forward. So that's vital. I'll just focus on two specific aspects. I won't repeat stuff which Kate has said in terms of some of the missed opportunities that hopefully we can pick up through the forum. But one of the things Kate did say was about the clauses that are being inserted into FBT agreements to stop tenants from taking part in schemes and also taking part in private sector natural capital schemes as well. And interestingly, I was listening to a podcast this morning from a firm of agricultural solicitors who were saying how routinely such clauses were now being inserted into farm business tenancy agreements, and how problematical they are being for tenants. And it is quite interesting, Minister, that the Welsh government, in its agricultural bill for Wales, came forward with its own change to the bill to allow tenant farmers on FBTs to have the same access to dispute resolution for an unreasonable landlord who refuses them access, who refuses them consent to join a government financial assistance scheme. It was a recommendation in the Rock Review report that DEFRA should do that in England. Wales seems to be ahead of the game on that as far as that's concerned within England. So I'd be really interested to know whether that's something you will pick up now that the Welsh government have understood it's a problem. And the other issue is, in your response, Minister, you said there wasn't very much evidence about land being lost into the sector in terms of landlords putting themselves into pole position. on the very same solicitors webinar I was listening to this morning. They were saying how they were being inundated with requests from landlords to begin to take land back in hand for the sorts of things that we were talking about in terms of natural capital and joining schemes and tree planting and solar and the like. So I think the evidence is there that there is a problem, and we are going to lose land if we don't fast do something about that. So finding a way to stop landlords from having access to public finance or taking land out of the sector, which is against the public policy of ensuring we keep the tenanted sector and to the same extent, is going to be very important. So, Mark, you said I might be negative. I'll try not to be too negative. We are grateful for the amount of effort and energy that is being put in now to making sure we get through these recommendations. We are ready to work positively with government. We will still be a critical friend, but there are some issues that we just do need to press home. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks, George. No, it's good to hear. And just to remind everybody, all of the documents. So the government's response to the ROC review, Baroness Rock's response, and the ROC review itself, and also our comments on it are all available on our website for anybody who wants to access those after the webinar and read through them. There's quite a lot to go at, so set yourself a bit of time aside to do some of that. Okay, that's brilliant. George, are you okay to stay while we do the Q&As? Because I think sometimes it would be useful to have your input on the answers to some of these as well.
I'm very happy to stay, and maybe, Mark, if I could be so bold, you can ask the Minister to answer my first two questions about FBTs and about land lost, and then go to any other questions. Sorry if I'm disturbing you.
That's where I was going to start with the FBT question. So I'm probably, and please forgive me, all of you, if I do jump around the houses a little bit with where the questions are. We've got quite a few, and there's a few that have been raised, but could we perhaps just start with that, as George suggested and was in the ROC review, the protections that are afforded to AHA tenancies are in Wales, I understand, being allowed or being pushed across to FBTs as well, but hasn't been done in England. I wonder, Minister, if you could explain what the logic of that is and when you're going to change your mind.
Yeah, so I think that the other thing that George said, of course, was he was disappointed we didn't accept all the recommendations, all 74. And I think, anybody who's been involved in politics knows that I cannot name a report that the government has accepted every recommendation in my political career. Normally, governments ignore all the bloody reports that come their way and find a way to dodge all the recommendations and write back politely saying, no, well, thanks for your advice, but we're not going to do any of that. And I think this is different. We genuinely have tried to embrace this and run with it. Now, I hear what you say about Wales. I think it is something that the forum could look at and continue to review. And if we think it's not working, we could look at that again. I think my difficulty is there are so many varied types of FBT, whether they are single year rental for veg crops or for root crops, particularly in England. And we just got to make sure we get that balance right between not over-regulating, but making sure the marketplace is working for both sides in this, in this system. But it's not something that I'm dismissing out of hand. I'm not too proud to acknowledge that if something is working somewhere else, that we shouldn't steal that. So my mind is still, open to persuasion, but at this moment in time, we didn't feel it was the right thing to do. And on the taking land back in hand, I really need that evidence. Everybody tells me anecdotally, this is happening here, this is happening there, and then when I say to them, give me an example, tell me the landlord, tell me the landowner, tell me the tenant, and tell me the particular case where this is happening. That sort of data is very helpful if you can feed that in sort of confidentially with concrete examples. Because, when I talked to landlords, Kate and I yesterday were with the National Trust, and they were quite open. They said that there may be a couple of examples where they have taken some land back in hand, but that's often near the coast where nobody seems to want to take on the tenancy because of the challenges, and they're going to sort of create salt marsh. But they are very resistant to doing that, and they want to work with their tenants. Now, I think the National Trust are probably a very good example of a good landlord. And I'm not dismissing the fact that there aren't people out there that aren't good landlords, but I really would welcome that concrete evidence and holding numbers where this is happening.
I wonder, I'm getting confused with names. Can I just call you Mark and Kate? Because I'm getting so confused at calling people minister and baroness and whatever. So forgive me if I'm being impolite, but I'm just going to call you Mark and Kate and George for the time being.
I get called a lot worse, I can assure you. So,
Kate, I wonder when you were going round, last summer, and you had a lot of input from tenants of, in all sorts of locations. Where did you see that evidence of land coming back in? It would be interesting. I mean, obviously, we're not asking for names, but
I think Mark is absolutely right that it has to be evidence based, and I suspect that you can provide some good examples, and I don't need to. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to name names on a public webinar, and I can certainly give Mark examples as well. But I think, it was there was either examples of land that had been taken back or the threat of land being taken back, unless certain criteria was put in place in terms of the agreement. So it was as I said in the report, there was a lot of concern about, if you don't sign this new agreement, which says that I can do the schemes, we're going to take the land back in hand. So it was a combination of those two things.
Okay, so are we right in saying that as part of the response, I think I see that we're likely to be able to have agreements where if a tenant doesn't have a long enough period of time, we can still go forward with that, and the landlord stroke the new tenant will take that on, and we can also have joint applications with certain things. So that should be welcomed and perhaps go some way to helping, not necessarily alleviating land coming back, but helping that situation. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and I think that really matters, particularly for things like capital grants. So if you're a dairy farm and you've got a 10-year tenancy and you're going to invest in slurry infrastructure, for example, that's a sort of generational investment. You may want to be able to do a deal with your landlord where you can do a joint application and agree what percentage you pay and what percentage the landlord pays, but still be able to access those grants. And I really want to be able to allow those relationships where it works positively to flourish and to work. And the other aspect of that, of course, is there'll be no penalties. So if you lose control of that land, if you sign a 5-year FBT and for some reason there's a change of use or whatever, you're evicted off that piece of land, you won't be penalised as the tenant for losing management control of that if your tenancy lapses shorter than the period that you signed up for.
Okay, yeah, good. Okay, so just moving on.
Can I just add one thing? I think we just want to also be clear about why some land is being taken back in hand. It's not just necessarily for wood planting. There is quite a high profile example, again, I'm not going to mention names, of a solar farm, of a tenant basically losing half their farm for solar. So I just want to be clear, it's not just about schemes. This is also about, there's a whole land use discussion that really does need to be had. And I know that government are going to come out later this year with a land use policy. Mark, I think that's correct. And I think it's really important that it's not just about scheme, it is about the wider land use. So, solar and other things need to be really looked at and engaged from an agricultural perspective. We do not want to lose good productive land, out of our agricultural system that is producing food.
Yeah.
So sorry, I just wanted to add. Sorry, apologies.
No, absolutely, George. Did you want to?
Yeah, just to say, in terms of the issue of land being taken out of the sector. If you were to pick up any publication from any of the major firms of land agents these days, when they are writing stuff which they want landlords to pick up, they are routinely saying, keep things short, keep things available, because there are advantages coming down the road on things like biodiversity net gain, nutrient neutrality, carbon, solar, as Kate was saying. So the landlord agent community is already out there telling its clientele to ensure that it can have access to these things as quickly as they possibly can. So what I'm worried about is that we're at the tip of the iceberg at the moment. So we are potentially going to see this getting worse. So the sooner that we can resolve those issues in terms of the tenanted sector, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know whether we've lost the minister. Have we? We've lost the picture, or I have, maybe. No, I'm still there.
Crack on, Mark.
Anyway, just while we're on sort of land use and slightly on schemes, and you make a very good point there, Kate, about it's not just about schemes, this with land use. So that does need bearing in mind. But we've had a couple of questions around elms and the new schemes, and to a degree, how does this the response help? So first of all, I'm just going to lump two together here. Is there a member in Worcestershire saying, I've been on a succession of 2-year FBTs that I have to renegotiate every time they come up for renewal. My landlord won't countersign any application to allow me to join Countryside Stewardship. So how will what has announced being today help me get into new schemes? And another question from a member in Leicestershire, similar theme. In my FBT agreement, there's a clause which says I can't join any government environmental schemes. I want to take part. What can I do without going against my agreement? So a little bit to do, have we got anything today that will help in either of those situations?
I'm going to wait. He's back. Can I
don't know. Did you hear those questions or not? You probably possibly not. I'll just repeat them very quickly. We're still on. We're on elms and schemes and whatever.
Hang on. Can you hear, Mark? Can you hear? Because he's still connecting to audio, I think.
Point. No.
It's okay.
I tell you what. Can we just Kate, could you perhaps have a stab at what we've heard today, and we'll wait for the minister to come back and get a.
Absolutely. I think the short answer is unfortunately not. And that is what I was referring to in terms of this self-assessment for tenants. I feel that it's absolutely right that tenants should be able to self-assess to go into schemes and deliver public goods for public money with, food production and nature alongside. And it's really, really disappointing to hear that a landlord is refusing to countersign a Countryside Stewardship scheme. Whoever that is, may I suggest that you write to me and that I can forward that into DEFRA and to the minister. And also that I think it was, did you say Leicestershire? I think you said, Mark.
Yeah, Leicestershire was the clause in the agreement, which was.
And again, this is a completely live example of what we've just been talking about, which is, an FBT that has been negotiated. We've got 2 ministers now.
I think they're still trying to connect.
Okay. This is a really good example of I think we've got the minister back. Terrific. Hurrah. Can you hear me, Mark? Can you hear me?
You're on mute, I think, Mark.
Yeah, Mark, you're on mute, but he can hear me. So I'm just going to very quickly, Mark, for the benefit of the minister, just say the 2 questions as I heard them correctly was, one, that there was a landlord will not countersign a Countryside Stewardship. So how do they get into the scheme if the landlord won't sign? And the second question was that in the FBT of the agreement, there is a clause which says that they can't enter any government schemes. They want to enter environmental schemes, but they can't because of the clause. How do I get into these schemes without going against my agreement? Those were that's as I understand were the two questions.
Yeah.
And what I was saying, Minister, was that these are two very live examples of the problems that tenants are facing, and that we do need to see and move as swiftly as we can on countryside stewardship to a situation where a tenant can self-assess to go into countryside stewardship and doesn't need landlord consent, because they can then bring the benefits of the public goods, for public money that we all want to see in terms of the countryside stewardship benefits. So this is a very live example for me of what a shame. This person wants to do the right thing. This tenant farmer wants to do the right thing, and their landlord is stopping them. And the second is exactly to what we've been discussing, which is, there's an agreement and it's been signed, and they can't do anything. They can't go into SFI or countryside stewardship, or if they do, well, they can't because they'll break their tenancy agreement. So I'm urging both of those members, please, to write to me, and I will ensure that both of those circumstances are fed into DEFRA. Mark, I don't know whether you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, definitely. And we will take that up on behalf of those members if that is the circumstance they find themselves in, and take that directly to the landlord and to RICS as well if their land agent is advising their landlord to not engage in that process. That they're exactly the sort of concrete examples that I want to hear from, and we'll be as robust as we can be as a department. Apologies for the IT failure. We're now on the trusty iPhone rather than the laptop.
No worries.
Mark, can I just
Yes,
comment on that? I mean, I think I absolutely welcome the willingness of the minister to engage in individual disputes. And if what you're saying, Minister, is that every time I've got a landlord-tenant dispute, you're prepared to go in on our behalf, that would be really great to hear. But I think more seriously, what it demonstrates, I think the first question, if I'm right, Mark, you were saying it was a person who had a succession of FBT agreements.
Yeah, 2 years, several 2-year FBT.
Yeah, so they've been there for a while. They expect to be there for a while, and yet the landlord's not consenting to allow them into stewardship. And that's exactly one of the recommendations that the ROC Review made, that people should, if they have an expectation that they're going to be there, if the only issue is the fact that the landlord won't consent, then they should be able to self-assess to come into the scheme. So that's, I think, something that the forum could usefully look at, to avoid us having to call you every time, Minister, when we have a problem like that.
Yeah.
And on the other one, where there's a clause which basically says you can't join a scheme, then you can't join a scheme. And otherwise you're in breach of your agreement, and that's exactly where the sort of thing we've got in Wales now could be invoked in terms of people taking their landlord to a dispute resolution facility to say that clause is unreasonable. It's I need to have access. So very happy for you to join me, Minister, on all those issues that we've got. But I think a more overarching solution is something which we need to be going for.
So I accept that, George. And I think, obviously, I should be careful in that I'm probably the end arbitrator of those disputes as well. So they do get escalated right through an appeal system. I'm probably the one that ends up making the final decision. So you're right. I don't want to. Maybe we've just inadvertently created the commissioner role, and I volunteered to do it. But I accept that. Let's. My commitment is to work with you to try and solve these challenges. And I think sometimes, do you know what? Land agents and landlords are a bit lazy, and they just reach for an off-the-shelf agreement, which, I've rented an arable field before, which says I've got to keep all the water troughs clean and in good repair when there isn't a single water trough on the block of land. But they just reach for a standard tenancy agreement sometimes. And I think if you open a conversation with that agent or that landlord, you can get some of this stuff removed. But I accept there will be cases where that is not true, and where you do have people that want to try and nail you down and prevent you, and we will try and solve those challenges if we can.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that does appear to me to be one of the very first things that the Tenants Forum should be looking at, is how do you make these situations just not occur in the first place, because this is really, really current now. We've got clearly we've got BPS reduction accelerating. The way to get support for public money and public goods, which I think we're broadly speaking very much in favour of, but the way to get that has to be open to everybody. So, and it's critical now to some people's, business survival. So it would be really good if the forum, as it's almost its very first job, could be to see how these situations can be avoided.
Mark, I'm very conscious that we've got quite a lot of questions and we're all probably talking too much.
No, we have. Don't worry, we're getting on to the next one now. I'm doing my best. So this picks up on the code of practice, which perhaps you could just enlighten us a little bit on this. This is a member from Yorkshire who writes, "I feel bullied by my landlord's agent. He never puts anything in writing, and he tells me that if I speak to the landlord, it won't go well for me. Equally, he has told me that if I speak to the TFA about my situation, I might lose the land I rent altogether. Will the proposed code of practice deal with this?" And that it's this kind of bad behaviour, and I would say that we're not talking about the vast majority of agents here, but we do come across these all too often, which is a disappointing thing. So perhaps we could just be enlightened a little bit about how the code of practice and how the RICS are going to embrace this and how this might help this kind of situation.
Yeah, so Mark, I'll tell you what, I'll read directly from our response, which says basically we agree with the ROC Review recommendation that DEFRA should commission a code of practice on expected standards of socially responsible behaviour for how all parties involved in agricultural tenancies agreements, brackets landlords, tenants, occupiers, land agents and other professionals are expected to behave. And we're pleased to announce that the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors has come forward to lead the development of this important code of practice within its public interest remits. And now, that sort of behaviour that you described sounds to me as like it was inappropriate and is unprofessional. And I think that's exactly the sort of practice that we want to stop from happening. I've been a victim of that myself, where I had a 5-year FBT and the land agent wrote to me with a 20% rent increase only last year. And I went directly to the landlord and said, bloody hell, that's a bit steep. He did not know that they'd asked for any rent increase, never mind a 20% one. And so, we were able to bypass, because I've got a good relationship with the landlord. Now, it seems to me that I probably got, I'm going to slander somebody if I'm not careful, but I probably got some excitable young land agent who just come out of Cirencester who thought he'd make his mark and prove to the landlord that he was a brilliant agent and got him a 20% increase in his rent. But they're the sort of behaviours that we want to stop from happening and want to be able to call out. And if you're making idle threats, verbally, that's inappropriate behaviour, in my opinion. And I hope the RICS will take that very seriously. And we'll be looking at the code of practice they come forward with to make sure that it's appropriate and robust enough.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good step forward. Kate, do you?
No, nothing to add. I think Mark summed it up extremely well, and I'm really pleased. I think this is a great recommendation, and I think we'll see. We've got to get it working quickly and fast, and that's what RICS will do.
Brilliant.
This is also a really good example of where this new working group will deliver the implementation. We'll hold the feet of RICS to the fire and say, right, how long are you going to be? We want to see a draft of your recommendations. Give us the time scale and really be able to drive this change through and make sure it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really to be welcomed, I think. Just moving on then from the code of practice to the other thing that perhaps needs a little bit of explanation, maybe, is the role of the Tenant Farming Commissioner, which is going out for evidence, I believe. Is that correct? And I just wonder, I suspect this is something which, and I'll include myself in here, that quite a few members aren't exactly clear what the Commissioner might do. And I think we welcome it because it's nice to have anybody that's fighting on our behalf, but it would be useful to know from you both what you see that role might be, and in the case, Mark, of yourself, whether what evidence you think we're looking for to justify or otherwise a role of a commissioner.
Yeah. So speaking as Mark rather than as a member of the government, I am a little bit sort of the conservative in me, the Tory in me says I don't like regulators, I don't like bureaucratic bodies, and I don't like creating extra sort of quangos and structures unless they are absolutely necessary, because they can sometimes get legs and powers that you didn't really mean to create. But then the farmer in me says we need a referee and someone to step in where there is abuse, because I don't like bullies, and I don't like people who find themselves exploited and put into a difficult place. So I'm genuinely torn on the idea of this, and I think the Scots are creating one. I'd quite like to see how that's operating in Scotland. So we didn't feel as though we could dismiss it and say no, and we didn't really feel confident enough to say yes, we should definitely do it, which is why we sort of come up with this compromise of let's have a really proper look at it again and try and understand and get under the skin of what it would do, what its remit would be, what its limitations would be. Because there's been criticism. We created the Grocery Code Adjudicator, and Christine Tacon did a very good job, and the new chap is also doing a good job. But there's also been criticism of that, and that it's not got enough teeth, and it doesn't necessarily deliver for farmers who are dealing with processors. So I think it's a genuine open mind to what the evidence might be and trying to understand. And I think again, that is a job for that farmer forum to deliver on.
Brilliant.
Okay. That's as honest an answer as I can give. Please don't.
Thank you very much. It's really, really good to hear. I think it's the point of what we absolutely didn't want with this was let's just go out and review what the recommendation was, and you've accepted that recommendation, and now we know people know what they need to do in order to say whether that's something that's going to get taken forward, and I think that is positive as well. So, yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think we in the review we wrote out what we thought the commissioner should do. I think that it was very evidence-based. But now we need to get the forum to look at it, and the call for evidence will be important, and everybody on this call, I'm sure, will want to get involved with it. But it is something now that, as Mark says, we've got it halfway there. We now need to just push it. We need to provide further, more evidence, more voices, more industry power to demonstrate the absolute need for it and how it should be, and importantly, what it can do and how it should do it. So I'm absolutely convinced that we will be convincing the minister that it is a need.
Excellent.
Mark, can I just come in and to say what we don't want the commissioner to do is to be involved in individual disputes. So we're not looking for it to be like an ombudsman type role where people complain to it and then they seek individual recourse from the commissioner. The commissioner, to our mind, and I think in Kate's mind in terms of the report, is more overarching. It's about, we talked about how important this code of practice is going to be. Well, who has responsibility to ensure that code of practice is being followed? To whom can we trust the enforcement of that code of practice across the sector? Well, DEFRA could do that, but better it was through a commissioner who developed it, made changes to it as it needed it, reviewed how it was going, was able to examine where it was effective or not effective. I think also it would be good to have a body which looked over the way in which we resolve disputes within tenancy agreements. So we have arbitration, which is ostensibly a confidential process between landlords and tenants, but arbitrators' awards have deal with very important issues. And if we had a facility for the commissioner to look at arbitration awards and to report on the sorts of things that arbitrators were finding in their awards on disputes, then it would be informing the whole of the sector about how to to do deals on a better basis. So I think there are overarching things the Commissioner can do, but we certainly don't want it to be a complaints bureau. We've got enough dispute resolution facilities for that. We don't want it to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really useful. I'm obviously, as ever, conscious of time, and particularly for the Minister giving up his time, and I'm sure he's ready not to be here. But I'm gonna squeeze in one last question, which is a little bit from some Q&A that we've had in this evening around new entrants. I'm going to paraphrase some of these just so you get a flavour as to what we're asking. Michael Summers asks, he says, my youngest son currently works in Western Australia. He's skilled and passionate about agriculture. Why should he come back to the UK? Following on from that, Kate Dale says, we've got many capable sons and daughters, as well as potential new entrants raring to be part of family businesses. How do we reassure them that there's a future on tenanted farming families? And we had one sent in from a member from Devon earlier, asking what will we do to encourage more landlords to let new entrants in? And I know new entrants is a whole subject in itself, but it would be interesting just finally to answer Michael's question about why should his son come back to the UK. That might be a bit broader than tenant farming, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think I said in the House today, actually, you know, if ever there was a moment in history where we need the brightest and most committed people to come into our sector, where we're faced with the challenge of feeding the world, but doing that whilst reducing our carbon footprint, improving our biodiversity and protecting the environment, we are going to need the brightest and the best people to do that. And I think that's not just going to be the job of the government. We've been pretty poor as a sector at promoting ourselves, you know, in terms of food and drink and farm and food production. We've sort of abdicated responsibility to others, and we've not done a good enough job ourselves as stakeholders in promoting careers within food and farming to the next generation. And I think we all have a role to play in trying to do that. There is a scheme which we are piloting for new entrants. It's not easy to get into agriculture. It never has been. You know, I think traditionally it was dairy farming. It sort of then migrated to outdoor poultry, outdoor pigs. What we are seeing is people getting involved with flying flocks now, particularly with stubble turnips and overwinter cover crops, and the necessity to have sheep chew them off in the spring. Lots of young people are using the sort of flying flock model to get involved in farming, but we need to find other ways. And your sponsor, Oxbury Tonight, they've been at the forefront of trying to find financial options to help and support the next generation in. YFC are doing a lot of work as well, and the government will try and play its part in helping and supporting. But you know, I think the truth is, over the last 3 generations, it's been bloody hard. You know, I think in Nottinghamshire, the number of people I can count on one hand, the number of successful new entrants who've gone on to build a very successful business within farming, they are quite rare examples. And the trouble is, when the farm comes up for rent down the road, we're all falling over ourselves, aren't we, to bid and get stuck in without thinking that maybe there's an opportunity there for a young person to get stuck in. And I think try and put a positive spin on the end. You know, I think there are also lots of good people who try and help that generation, who try and give them a leg up, who will lend them equipment, who will give them advice, who will help and support when things go wrong. And I think there are lots of good people in farming, and we need to try and get more people involved.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, to Kate Dale's point about her sons and daughters who want to become part of the family business, you know, I'm really proud of the fact that I'm part of my family business and that I farm with my father. And you know, it's a wonderful, you know, farming is a really important you know, family businesses and for generations to generations, and we really must encourage our young to get involved. I remember on my travels meeting a young farmer called James, who tried for so many times to get a tenancy and couldn't get one. And, you know, he's a fantastic young farmer, and he's exactly the sort of people that we should be supporting and helping. So, you know, we need a vision for young entrants. We need a really vibrant scheme. And, you know, I've made recommendations in the review. you know, to really ensure that we have those brilliant young people who are going to really embrace, to Mark's point, are going to really embrace the technology and the innovation that as a sector we do need to embrace. You know, we are, let's face it, some of us perhaps, you know, quite set in our ways in terms of our farming, and we really do need to embrace the new product. You know, there are schemes for productivity, there's innovation schemes from DEFRA. You know, we can really make this a really exciting sector. And, you know, tenancies are a very easy, well, not easy, way of getting in for new entrants, because otherwise you have huge barriers, you know, to access for land and access for capital if you're going to not everyone can afford to buy their own land. I'm really excited about the future. Just on a high note, like Mark, I'm actually really excited about the future of agriculture. I think we are brilliant farmers, all of us around the country. I'm really proud to be a farmer. And I expect us all to be sitting here in 10 years' time being really proud of everything that we've achieved. And that really massively includes having a vibrant tenanted sector. So I'll end on a high, Mark.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. And I think I would agree with that. That there's a lot to look forward to, and it's I think a lot of what's come out.
Mark wants to show you something.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Sorry,
I've got a raving mad one there. Look, there's my daughter who's coming into the industry, who's mad on sheep. I'm trying to do everything I can to put her off, but I can't seem to.
I'm going to have to find a picture of my son doing fencing now. I mean, building fences as opposed to, you know, and my daughter down at the dairy. See, we all love it, don't we, Mark? It's brilliant.
Maybe that's the problem, Mark. There, we've spent all our time talking to our children about how they might want to try and find an easier job to do, but perhaps we should be encouraging them to just step up and get involved. So because we do need it, we need young blood coming through into the industry for sure. Listen, I've been hopeless again at keeping to time. We're already past 8 o'clock, so we'll wrap it up here. I suppose it's just for really me to say thank you very much to Minister Spencer and to Baroness Rock for attending tonight. It's been really good to hear. There's a lot of good stuff in there. As we've said, and George has said, there's much still to do, obviously, but I think we've got some really positive stuff that we can get our teeth into. The most positive of which, for me, certainly, is the fact that it's pretty clear that tenant farming is very much on the agenda for the government, and that's really good to hear. And I think we shouldn't forget that there are some very good examples of very good, healthy collaboration between landlords, tenants, agents, and the like. So let's pick up that best practice and try and spread that throughout the industry. So thank you very much, Mark, Minister Spencer, for coming, and to Kate for once again turning out and giving us your views, and also to George for his input into this. We shouldn't forget, as an organisation, that George is absolutely key to working on our behalf tirelessly to keep tenants at the forefront, and it's testament also to George's efforts that we as an organisation get listened to around the table. So that's also good to see. Just before we go, a final big thank you to Oxbury for once again sponsoring this, and a bit of a shout out for anybody. I was going to say anybody in the Southwest, but of course anybody can go to the Cornwall show. You don't have to be in the Southwest. You could be from anywhere. It's on the 8th, 9th and 10th of June. We've got a couple of events worth just promoting. On the 8th of June, the Secretary of State, Therese Coffey, is joining us on the Towergate stand. I don't know the Cornish Showground, but it's close to the members' enclosure, I'm told. If you get there for 10:45, you'll be able to have a Q&A session with the Secretary of State. And on the 9th of June, you can have a similar thing with Baroness Rock, talking about the Rock Review and tenant farming generally. So 2 really good things to attend in Cornwall next month. So just suffice for me to say a big thank you to everybody that's attended this evening. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. As I say, it's on the YouTube channel, and it's on our website if you want to pick that up. So I wish you all to have a very good evening, and thank you for attending.